Thank you for joining us. I'm Fiona Mbabazi, and this is the 360 Degrees, where we will be talking or rather discussing Rusesabagina's trial, a case of justice versus politics. Last Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, the High Court Chamber of 4 international and cross-border crimes sentenced 21 terror suspects to varying prison terms, among them including Paul Rusesabagina, who was handed the longest prison sentence of 25 years, and followed by Caliste Nsabimana, who served 20 years, who will be serving 20 years, among others. Rusesabagina's arrest, trial, and court sentence sparked mixed reactions internally and on the international scene in Rwanda. Now, some people say Rusesabagina should have served a longer prison sentence, but to some international observers, the arrest and trial of Rusesabagina shouldn't have happened in the very first place, despite the facts behind it. Is it the question of justice coming face to face with politics? Well, tonight on the 360 Degrees, we engage those who understand this topic better. And of course, I'm joined by my very able panelists to help us deduce this. I am joined by Yolande Makolog, the government spokesperson for Rwanda. Thank you for making time to be with us, Yolande.
Thank you for inviting me.
We also have Mr. Alphonse Mulefu, a senior lecturer at the School of Law and of University of Rwanda. Thank you for joining us, Alphonse.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, on Skype, I will be joined by Linda Marvin. She is a British investigative journalist, and she will be helping us to understand more from the international perspective. Thank you for joining us, Linda, this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we'll just go straight to the topic of the day. Alphonse, I'll start with you. Now, some people say the sentence is short, Others have come out to say the trial should not have taken place in the very first place. So what do you make of the 25-year sentence on Paul Rusesabagina as a legal expert?
Thank you very much. Our laws provides a threshold in which sentences are given, depending on crimes which you've been found guilty. So it could be in a range of, depending on a crime, 10 to 25 years, 25 years to 40 years, but normally after 30 years it is life sentence. So the difference between Rwanda and some other countries is that in Rwanda we do not have cumulative sentencing. Meaning that on each account you've been found guilty, it is not an addition of the number of years you've been sentenced. It is a concurrent sentencing, meaning that you can be found guilty of 5 counts, in which each count you've been sentenced to 10 years, and at the end of the day you serve 10 years. If one have been 10, another one 25 years, another one 20, you serve the maximum. So that, which is different to some other countries where they add all those sentences together and then you serve the totality. So that makes a difference in terms of the number of years someone is can be sentenced to serve at the end. But also it is in the discretion of the courts. It is the courts that evaluates the evidence, and it is up to the court, depending on the severity or the seriousness of the crime, that they determine. And of course they may consider other reasons, and at the end they decide which sentence to give. So it is up to the parties, and for parties I mean the prosecution and the accused person, to decide whether they want to appeal. You can appeal on the conviction, but you can also appeal on the sentence.
On the sentence?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But why then do you think people choose, or rather the international media, if I should put it that way, now choose to rather focus on how Rusesabagina got to the country and not the case at hand today?
That is what you can, some people would call selection bias, because they choose to focus on the procedure, not on the substance, because they understand that the procedure will stop us from talking about the substance. Mm-hmm. And by selection bias, I mean a situation where states choose to interpret laws depending on what they want to achieve, whether they want to interfere or coerce or cooperate or to protect or defend certain interests. So by that selection bias, they will choose to support a certain interpretation rather than the other, even if the procedure itself is supported by a lot of both national and international jurisprudence. If you go to Europe, for example, you can find different cases in Germany, France, Belgium. If you go to US, the cases are so many. They actually have in the United States the principle that even in countries where they have the possibility of extradition to lure the suspect into a trap of arrest. So I think what we would be asking ourselves is, why is it that it is believed, even if we have all this evidence? And I think international media, and in this case, by international I mean the global West, Western Europe and North America, have managed to convince us that all African leaders are bad. And if you try to challenge or to nuance that statement, they have another perception that the relationship between citizens and the states in Africa is based either on patronage or ethnic alliances. Yeah. So in that case, they discredit the person who's trying to give a different perspective, and that gives space to whoever is trying to argue something, even if that person has no facts or the understanding of the situation. So I think that's where the problem lies. Absolutely. And actually that's where it comes, the idea of these states supporting both states and non-state actors, because they believe that by supporting both, they are trying to create a balance. And I think it is up to us to decide whether citizens of other countries should be telling us how we relate with others, with our states. So let me leave it there.
Absolutely. You'll want to bring you in now. You know, some Western countries have shown so much interest in this particular case of Paul Rusesabagina. Even countries went ahead to give statements, you know, like Belgium, which of course Belgium was part and parcel in helping us doing the investigations, you know, with the FBI. Where does the country stand in terms of seeing other countries making bold statements about Rwanda?
I mean, this case has drawn so much attention, obviously because this person happens to be some sort of celebrity, the main person in the group of 21, but he's only one of the suspects. And he happened to have been portrayed in some way in a Hollywood film. The film was successful. It got an Oscar award, and it captured people's imagination. But all this commentary is coming through as if we were frozen in time, as if this convicted, now convicted terror leader is exactly the same person that he was or he claimed to be in 1994 or 2004 when the film came out. What they have ignored is that as time elapsed, Paul Rusesabagina evolved into something that was the complete opposite of what was portrayed in the film. He claims to have saved people at the Milcolin Hotel in 1994, people who were threatened by genocide, and we know who was threatened during the genocide of the Tutsi. He claimed to have saved a number of people, more than 1,000. But then the reality is, even as early as 2 years after the film came out, Paul Rusesabagina was already plotting with FDLR, the very people he claims to have saved people from. So it's a complete contradiction that that part doesn't seem to penetrate with many audiences, and the media that influences the politicians in certain countries have refused to look into that, even though they have all the means to. And as you know, during this case, okay, we had a lot of evidence, prosecution had tons of evidence, but a lot of it came from open sources. I mean, we all heard him in 2018 on the radios, on BBC Radio, BBC Kinyarwanda Radio, on VOA. Some of those shows are still up online. The fact that he was speaking in Kinyarwanda, a language that we speak in Rwanda, all of us speak, that these other media maybe don't understand, does not mean that he didn't say those things. And this is what was presented in court. By his own admission, he formed a political coalition that had an armed wing. There's no difference between an armed wing and a militia. It's a group of fighters with arms who go out to kill people,
That's true.
to cause terror. And he admitted to this himself in his speeches online and in court as well. So I think the uproar is unjustified. It is it's biased, and it's as if we're living in a parallel universe. I would like to ask these people, did you listen to the trial? Did you watch the trial? There's a reason this trial was online. Every day of this process was live streamed.
Absolutely.
Anyone who's interested, as these institutions and countries claim to be, should have followed this carefully, because it was all out in the open. So the interest, there's nothing wrong with being interested in a judicial process. That's fine. But then the assessment of what's happening has to be based on reality, and it has to be based on facts. And the facts are, Paul Rusesabagina was the de facto leader of FLN, and FLN attacked innocent civilians in Rwanda. At least 9 people died, 2 children. Families are devastated, property was looted. That whole region was living in fear for many, many months. We had travel advisories coming out. These very same countries that are criticizing us and criticizing the outcome of the trial, they were putting out travel advisories: do not travel to southwestern Rwanda. Armed people killing civilians, so stay away from this touristic area. So their judgment of us has to be based on facts.
On facts. Speaking of facts, my director, if you can please refresh your minds with the court ruling video, please. Thank you.
The ruling has been made by the High Court Chamber for International and Cross-Border Crimes, and among the group of 21, Paul Rusesabagina's sentence of 25 years was by far the most severe. The decision of the court sentences Paul Rusesabagina to 25 years in prison. Calixte Nsabimana, also known as Sankara, is sentenced to 20 years in prison. Calixte Nsabimana, Berchmas Matakamba, Kassie Bizimana, Jean Damascene Nsabimana, Mark Nzeimana, Jean-Claude Byukusenge, Innocent Nibiramira, and Emmanuel Shaban all got 20 years behind bars. Simon Nikuzgwe got 10 years, while Herman Sengimana, Felicien Sanzubukire, Anastase Munyaneza, Marcel Nirora, Andre Kwitonda, Theogene Hachizimana, Emmanuel Iramuremye, and Angelina Mukandutie got 5. Jean Dajijimana and Emmanuel Shimimana each got a sentence of 3 years in prison, by far the shortest sentence in the ruling. The team of prosecutors was not happy with any of the sentences passed and said they are going to appeal.
The reaction for the prosecution is that we are not happy to some of the judgment that we rendered today, because the sentences that were given to Sankara and his co-accused, we found them that to be very lenient, because we had requested initially, let's say, for For Sankara, 25 years. He was given 20 years. We requested for life sentence. He was given 25 years. And even others, others were given 5 years, others 20, others 25. So we are going to have time, take our time and read the judgment, make our own assessment and see if we can appeal, because we think we have the grounds for appeal against this judgment.
It is not just the sentences that have left many not happy, because some of the victims of the FLN attacks who also sued for compensation were not granted what they had asked for due to insufficient evidence.
Hari ibyo twari twaregeye indishyi urukiko rutahaye agaciro.
Some of the things we asked for compensation were disregarded by the court over insufficient evidence. We were not happy with that, because during the court proceedings, we obviously could not produce evidence for some of the things, such as the property that was stolen or destroyed. However, we believe some in our group could appeal. The defendants now have 30 days to appeal the sentences if they choose to. Rwanda's government spokesperson has issued a press release noting that even though the trial took a long time to conclude, it has exposed many of the operations of the FLN terrorist group and shown irrefutable proof of the guilt of Paul Rusesabagina. The government of Rwanda has also commended the courage of victims of the group's attacks that provided testimony in court.
Well, since the beginning of July 2018, the NLF launched a military struggle to liberate the Rwandan people. Until today, it is imperative that in 2019, we speed up the liberation struggle. Rwandan people can no longer stand the cruelty and all kinds of ill treatment directed to us by the RPF regime. The time has come for us to use any means possible to bring about change in Rwanda, as all political means have been tried and failed. It is time to attempt our last resort. Hence, I plead my unreserved support that our youth, the National Liberation Forces, NLF, launches against the Kagame army in order to free the Rwandan people. As Rwandans, it is important to understand that this is the only way to bring about change in the whole country. For this fact, I call upon all Rwandans, all political and civil society organizations to support these young women and young men who took a lead in this struggle and to mobilize.
Well, clearly the videos, like we say, let the videos do the talking. And of course, the government spokesperson mentioned some of the facts that we have just clearly shown. I want to bring in now Linda, who is a British investigative journalist. I just want to ask her, being on the other side of the world, the international side, we have seen that despite the case, we have seen the facts that some of it that you've just watched right now, Linda. However, we still see people say that the trial was not fair. What do you think of this?
First of all, I see this from the position of an investigative journalist. And I think that the material evidence that was presented in the trial is extraordinary. I think rarely in a trial does one get so many communications, emails and WhatsApp messages. And so looking at the evidence, I'm amazed at the coverage of, I think you just called it the Global West. The coverage in the UK has been overwhelmingly based on two assumptions. One, that he is the hero of Hotel Rwanda, when it is patently proven to be false. And two, that he is innocent of the charges of terrorism brought against him in Rwanda. Now, those two assumptions are widespread in our press. I compared the coverage of the Rusesabagina trial in France and in Belgium. the remarkable articles by Colin Bretman, who actually has read some of the testimony, is in stark different to the very different to the coverage that we have in the UK. In Libération, there was detail about the raid on Rusesabagina's home in Brussels, detail of what was seized at the time. All of this too is simply ignored, and the evidence is based on, I assume, a Hollywood film, and then a claim that the trial was unfair. So no, I'm shocked at this. I think that the Rusesabagina trial shows perhaps a different standard of reporting Africa, reporting Rwanda, than reporting Western trials. I can't think of any comparative with this situation.
Absolutely. But then, where do we draw the line of objectivity here, Linda? You know, as a journalist, where do we draw the line of objectivity when it comes to such cases?
Well, you know, your objectivity is based on the facts that you find. You know, I come to this as an investigative journalist, and what I write, I'm an information hoover. You know, I gather information, and then I put that information before the reader, and I hope to do that objectively, and I hope that my sources and references show that I have consulted a wide variety before I have actually published my material. And that's really important. We cannot base reporting on assumptions. That's the danger.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Mlefu, I want to bring you back in, you know. From seeing this case, the trial itself, what have you learned from this particular terror trial that we can say that, you know, our judiciary system is quite able to carry more trials like this?
I think you can take like 3 lessons or more. One is that Rwandan courts proved to be independent because they resisted a lot of pressure, pressure from NGOs, international NGOs and media and different actors, basically those that were supporting Rusesabagina. So that is, and that's actually the essence of judicial independence, because we wouldn't be talking of judicial independence if there was no desire to interfere. So the ability of courts to resist pressure is what is known as judicial independence. So that we can say Rwandan courts did their best to consider only facts, evidence, and law as they were presented in court. 2, we can also take a lesson that states or actors will support victims or suspects depending on who are the victims or who are the perpetrators of crimes. And that is very important, because if we are called as states to cooperate in matters of international security, but we do so selectively depending on who is affected, that is a very dangerous way of doing things. And 3 is that Rwandan courts and basically Rwanda's judicial system, and in this case I mean the 3 legs of justice, the investigation, prosecution, and the courts, is that it is a demonstration of the government's ability to protect Rwandans, because it is the legitimacy of states depends on states or government's ability to protect the citizens, to provide law and order, and services, among other things. So Rwanda, if you consider this case, you will certainly see that it deployed all its resources possible to have these suspects. You talk of only Rusesabagina, but Karisti Nsabimana also was brought out from outside Rwanda. Absolutely. And these all other people were also brought from outside Rwanda. So and that actually should speak to why they focus on the procedure, because they know by the mere fact that a non-state actor engages in the use of force without even mentioning about the people that were killed and the property that were destroyed is in itself a crime, because it infringes on the state's monopoly of use of force. No any other actor in the country that is allowed to use force without the authorization of the state. So that in itself was criminal. So they know, let us focus in how he was arrested, because we know that when we go to the substance, we don't have a case.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to bring you in the in the objectivity of the media in all this. Being the spokesperson, you have spoken to rather very many TV or rather radios as well. What lessons have you learned, and what can we do more to ensure that such cases, even in the future, despite the objectivity of the other people, how can we maintain our own objectivity and bring it out clearly?
I've talked to a lot of media this week, and it's been very interesting. And I'm happy that I'm able to talk to home media, RBA. I'm happy to be here to discuss this with you. Of all the interviews I did, and there were many, it felt like one long interview, because it was the same question. It's what Linda was saying, that none of the questions that I was bombarded with are based on fact. They're based on assumptions. They're based on assumptions on who this person is or claims to be, and also on the assumption that he's innocent because he's political opposition, and then confirmation bias about the perceived shortcomings of our government. So it's been, the lesson is we have to tell our story, and we have to tell our story based on the facts. Apart from a few media like Libération did an investigation, and local media here, I didn't see anyone talking about the victims.
Absolutely.
And you know what happens when there's a terror incident in other countries, these countries that are criticizing us? We will know who the victims were. We will know everything about them. We'll know their names and what they did and where they came from and their hopes and aspirations. But because these were Black lives, African lives, somehow their assumptions about this convicted person and this terror group takes precedence over the lives of these victims. They have been completely erased from this story, completely, for the last 1 year. And I'm glad that local media took the time to visit these places and talk to survivors and families of people who were killed. So we have to do this. It's our responsibility to tell the story of what's happening here using the facts as we know them. And as well, I think I'll take this opportunity also to demystify this whole how he was brought here. We've been hearing the word kidnap, even rendition, and these are words that are more appropriate they're more appropriate to the kind of actions that this country take, not us. What responsible country doesn't have law enforcement that strategizes and sets up a plan to catch terrorists? These countries do it. Why can African countries not do it? Why can we not have a strategy to catch people we suspect are causing harm to Rwandans? This is what we did. And we have said it again and again, but I kept being asked, but you kidnapped him? No. Our law enforcement, the Rwanda Investigation Board, had this suspect in their sights. We had credible information gathered from investigations, from partner agencies around the world, from the US, from Belgium, from elsewhere, and Rwanda Investigation Bureau decided that they're going to get this guy to come to Rwanda and arrest him because there's an outstanding arrest warrant for him. And they planned this, they set up this trap. It was successful. No laws were broken. We didn't break any Rwandan laws. We didn't break any international laws. All those people who talk about kidnapping and breaking laws, I haven't heard them mention what law was broken. Bring it out. Tell us what law was broken. No laws were broken. He was brought here. No one was harmed during this whole operation. He was brought here safely of his own volition. He thought he was going somewhere else, but he came here. One of the questions that some of the questions I'm asked, and some of the things I hear being said by his supporters are, if our evidence was so solid, why didn't we ask for extradition? I mean, this is a terrorist. You don't write a memo to terrorists, please report to RIB on Monday morning from San Antonio and expect him to get here. So I think RIB did what they had to do within the law to arrest this guy based on the arrest warrant, and he was brought here, and he had the opportunity to defend himself. And the other thing too is they keep saying that, for instance, and this is the thing, the media, this global West media that we're talking about, swallows it wholesale with no scrutiny. As government, we're used to being scrutinized, and we're ready. I mean, bring it on. Tell us the criticism that you have, and we will defend ourselves. We'll defend our policies. We'll correct misinformation. I was with the Deep Africa expert Brian Endless on Al Jazeera, and he said that they have the file as well, and the evidence that was in the files was empty, and it was nothing. Fine. Rusesabagina should have come to court and trashed that evidence for the whole world to see, because this was live streamed. If they're so confident that that evidence was not enough to convict him, come to court, trash it. Come to court with your lawyers and trash it. But I suspect the reason he decided not to continue with the case is precisely because he knows, and they know, that the evidence was overwhelming. So they chose to go on the assumptions and on the confirmation bias, and keep the story of the kidnapping and the hero that is not based on facts, but based on some fantasy. So all we're saying is that he was convicted based on the evidence, right? And if anyone has any evidence to the contrary, they should bring it out.
Speaking, of the survivors that you've mentioned, RBA, of course, went and visited some of the survivors, and we have part of the video with us.
Hours of Friday morning, 38-year-old Josephine Mukasheka, a resident of Nyabimata Trading Center, is returning home from the market. On a taxi motor, the mother of two is carrying rice, sugar, beans and other foodstuff for her family. 2 years ago, her husband was killed in a deadly attack launched by FLN militia. The untimely passing of her husband left Mukasheka to fend for the family alone.
FLN militia killed my husband, Munyaneza Fidel, who was the chairperson of the councillors of Nyabimata sector. When they attacked at around 11 p.m. in the night, he received a call informing him that the car of executive secretary was burning. He left the house and I escorted him. We found the car burning and he started calling people for help. Immediately, the militia grabbed him and asked him to hand over his phone, which he did. They asked him in Kiswahili to run off. He thought they had spared him, but soon after turning his back, they shot him twice in the pelvis and the left side of the chest close to the heart.
On June 19th and July 1st, 2018, FLN militia launched an attack in Nyabimata Trading Center, killing 3 people and looting property in the region of millions of francs.
They started from that house painted in green. Inside was a young man called Habimana and was shot on the spot. They moved on. Upon reaching here, one group proceeded to burning a car on that side. The car was hooting while burning, and the man from this house, Munyaneza Fidel, the director of Nyabimata Primary School, stepped up to respond. They shot and killed him while coming out of his house. Another man got out of his house to check what was happening. They asked him where he was going, and he told them that he was coming to help his neighbor whose car was burning. He was immediately shot and killed. His body was lying here, and Fidel was shot in the leg and later died as well. The other died on the spot because he was shot in the head.
They
started shooting and the girl who was inside opened the door and ran away. They entered and started looting everything worth 312,000 Rwandan francs. They left me with nothing. I had to borrow money from Nyabimata Sacco to restart my business, and they were kind enough to give me the money.
FLN is an armed militia wing of the Rwanda Movement for Democratic Change, MRCD Trial, a coalition of terror organizations seeking to destabilize Rwanda, headed by Paul Rusesabagina. Rusesabagina was recently arrested and is said to be arraigned before the court in Kigali to face terror charges. We asked the survivors of 2018 terror attacks on what they make of Rusesabagina's arrest.
Some days back, we heard that Sankara, who led the terror attack group, was arrested, and recently Rusesabagina was also arrested. That gives us confidence in knowing that our government is not resting until they bring everyone to face justice.
Now that Paul Rusesabagina, who is the head of the FLN, and Kaliste Sabimana, who was leading the militia group that attacked this area, were arrested, what does it mean to you and your family, and of course the justice of your husband?
Kuba Rusesabagina yarafashwe, njyewe kubwanjye byaranshimishije cyane.
I'm very happy that Rusesabagina was arrested. It shows that our government will do anything to protect the people and assure justice. I believe that's what they made sure, that Rusesabagina is arrested, as well as Sabimana Kaliste, who calls himself Sankara.
Nayo mpamvu yakoze uko ishoboye kose igashakisha Paul Rusesabagina akaba yarafashwe ndetse na Sabimana Kaliste wiyita Sankara.
During the 2018 attacks, which was claimed by Rusesabagina's FLN, several people were injured, including the executive secretary of Nyabimata sector, Vincent Nsengiyumva. His car was also set ablaze. They also unsuccessfully tried to break into Nyabimata Savings and Credit Cooperative Organization. Over 2 years later, the wounds are still fresh among the residents of Nyabimata, who endured devastating militia attacks on 2 occasions, in June and July 2018, launched by FLN militia group. But now that the leaders are being arrested, including Paul Rusesabagina, there is hope that justice will be served. Reporting for RTV News, Ethan Tashobia in Nyabimata, Nyaruguru district.
Yes, just of course, like the government spokesperson mentioned, it is important to tell our own stories. Linda, I want to bring you in now. You know, most of the media, especially the international media, seem to be reporting, you know, virtually, and have not stepped foot in this particular place's case in point Nyabimata, like you've just watched. Is this true journalism?
No, it's not. And I'm profoundly ashamed of it, actually. You know, that this is how this is reported. I mean, what can I say? You know, it's absolutely shocking. And the evidence that Rusesabagina was not quite as he seemed has been obvious for a very long time. You know, there's no excuse to call him a hero. A British judge determined in 2008, when Rusesabagina came to London to try to prevent the extradition of suspected genocidaire in London, the British magistrate determined that Rusesabagina was a fantasist, that you couldn't believe a word he said. And in the courtroom, Rusesabagina denied genocide. He said that the killing had been spontaneous. And it's extraordinary to me that the evidence here is on the public record. You know what this judge said in 2008. His conclusion about Rusesabagina is there. So is there really, I think we need to ask ourselves, one set of journalistic rules when reporting the West and another entirely when reporting Africa, where it would appear, particularly with Rwanda, I think, that you could claim anything almost and have no supporting evidence at all. I am shocked by it. I'm shocked by the coverage of Rusesabagina, and I hope that one day, you know, that it will be realised how dreadful this coverage has been.
You know, this negative bias, if I should say it that way, you know, the international media reporting towards Rwanda, how do we change this? What needs to be done more to ensure that we have the right people speaking the factual reporting, especially in the international media?
You just have to keep working away, I'm afraid. You just have to keep reporting. In Rwanda, you have journalists who can continue with the tradition of reporting factually. This is really important, and perhaps not look so much towards the West for the coverage. I know it's very, very difficult. It's not easy to ignore it. You know, some journalists are writing nowadays who seem to be political activists. You know, they want to stop aid, or they want to stop the Commonwealth heads of government. They are somehow, I don't consider this really journalism at all, that's activism. So we have to make sure that we do stick to the facts, yes.
Thank you, Linda. Dr. Mleff, I want to bring you in, you know, a case of democracy right now. We look into democracy, you know, and the judicial independence that most African, or rather Western countries preach. A case in point, I'd want to think of Muammar Gaddafi, Osama bin Laden, you know, how they captured him, how he was killed, and everything else. Then we bring it to the fact of Rwanda, or the African context of it. Why is there always something different when it comes to African countries with how the Western countries do it?
Again, I think I will not go back to the selection bias I referred to in the first question. But let me return a little bit on the question of the supposedly rendition or abduction. If it was true, we would be seeing a state making a formal protest for its territorial violation. We haven't seen any. So that is, again, something that they have decided to create, and they still have to keep pushing it to us to believe that that is the case. So, as I said, we have a lot of precedent, a lot of similar cases where someone who did a PhD where I studied did an entire PhD thesis on the wrongful arrests of suspects. Wrongfully arrested, well detained. That was the title of his book, with over 1,000 pages detailing different cases where people, starting with the Adolf Eichmann to just the recent cases at the ICTY, or when the US lured a Lebanese suspect into international waters and they arrested him. So there's a lot of evidence. So the idea of suggesting that Rusesabagina was arrested in this very unusual way is something that doesn't add up. Another issue they have raised in terms of fairness is the search at the prison premises. I mean, prison administration have a responsibility to ensure that there are no contrabands that enter prisons. If they want to get some evidence, they should look into the case of this Bosnia Croat general who swallowed the poison in prison after he had been convicted. And the question was, how did he bring the poison into the prison? And this was a UN prison facility. The entire report that was made by Jallo, who was the former prosecutor at the ICTR on the commission by this residual mechanism was that whenever there is suspicion, a prison management has the responsibility to check and verify, because they have not only the responsibility of the well-being of the guards that protect the prison, because they have to protect themselves, but also the well-being of prisoners themselves. Because who knows, maybe someone who is trying to visit or who is sending something wanted to harm the person in detention for different reasons. So it is the responsibility of the prison administration to such detainees. The question is, if there was suspicion, if there was genuine suspicion that the information was coming from the prison management to the prosecution, which would be to destroy their defense plan, then they should have brought that to attention of the court, not to decide to withdraw from the trial, because that's the role of courts. It is to settle disputes between the litigants, between the defendant and between the prosecution and the accused person. So they chose to go for public statements because they have strength in generating public sympathy and international communities support through the Hollywood celebrities status. So that's what I can say about that.
You know, speaking of, celebrity status, like you've mentioned, we have seen some of the survivors calling out to say, the medal that he was given should be withdrawn. Some saying they need, some form of payment, some form of being given back to it. Where do we stand with that, Yolanda? As a government, the survivors are calling for more. What more needs to be done? What does the government say about this?
Again, we can only base ourselves on facts and on what the courts decide and respect the decisions of the court. Number one, they've been convicted, so that gives a level of justice. Rusesabagina prosecution asked for a life sentence for him. He got 25 years. I understand the prosecution is considering an appeal. They're also not happy with the sentence, with the other sentences that were given, because these were serious crimes. So I think for us, it's the way we deal with these issues of safety and security for our citizens is through our courts. This is not the only case, terror case that's ongoing. At the same time, concurrently, there was a case of a terror group that attacked Kinigi in October, I think 2019, a couple of years ago. These are also being tried in military court because some of these people are military. So this is what we do for our citizens. We provide security and stability, and when people break the law, they go through our courts, and the courts decide. So I think that's where our responsibility lies, as well as giving out the facts and making sure people understand what these processes are and what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe with the last 2-3 minutes that we have, our parting shots, towards the negativity that we receive, from the media. Yolanda, what would be a parting shot on this?
I think we have to be clear about the difference between a political party and a militia. We cannot call terrorists political opposition. That is ridiculous. This group it's a group of fighters with weapons that was acquired from somewhere and this was talked about in court. This was not a political party. It is not political opposition. I did not see any of their policies on health or agriculture or how to manage COVID, how to protect the citizens of Rwanda. They had one aim only, and that aim was to overthrow a legitimately elected government. And ultimately, a return to politics based on ethnicity. Take us back to where we've come from the very bottom. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable, and this is what governments do. They protect their citizens and ensure the security and stability. And what the court decided helps us in this. It helps us to ensure that people who break the law go where they need to go.
Absolutely.
And I'm pleased that the victims get some level of justice on this, and Rwandans feel more secure because of this process.
Absolutely. Dr. Mlefu, your parting shots.
Well, I should say that with all the wrong things of social media, but social media has also kind of leveled the ground. It has been an interesting horror of interacting with people who have been trying to make different claims about the case and giving misleading facts or statements, and media has provided us an opportunity to respond, and I think the ability of international media to frame everything in Africa is increasingly getting reduced, I would say. So that's what I can say.
Well, thank you. Linda, what will be your parting shots on this?
First of all, thank you for asking me to take part this evening. As far as I'm concerned, and my ongoing work is, I think that there will be more to come out about this story, about the Rusesabagina Foundation, whether or not it was fulfilling its role under American law as a foundation. I think probably more will come out about the campaign of denial that I have written about. You know, my last book was about genocide denial and Rusesabagina's role in that. And I think what it shows us are the dangers when you repackage a crime like genocide. You know, this extraordinary crime that people very often fail to understand. When you repackage that for Hollywood, then it's really quite dangerous. And I think that this tells us that you end up with a fog of lies, deception, denial. We have to be very careful.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Linda. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mlefu, for making time to be with us. Yolanda, the government spokesperson, thank you very much for making time to be with us. And Linda, thank you very much for joining us all the way from the UK. We appreciate your time. And of course, my name is Fiona Mbabazi. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of programming.